Aspect. Welcome back to yet another live broadcast on your favorite football updates channel. It's a pleasure to be back on this beautiful Thursday morning, the 26th of February 2026. Um, I do come to you live from Kampala, Uganda, where it's 47 minutes past 9 a.m. Intentionally late because it was a bit of a long night last night, in a way, given the extra time that the Juventus game led us down to. One that I must say I'd not seen coming, but also, like I told you last night, I'm a bit ill. It's like I have, I don't know, tonsillitis or something. I'm struggling to speak a bit with comfort and ease, but it is what it is. Nonetheless, we are glad to be up and running this morning, and we hope for a better day. For those of you that managed to join us last night for our broadcast, thank you so much. Your love doesn't go unnoticed. Keep doing the same. And for our new subscribers, we say welcome to the Football Tribe UG community. We hope that you get to enjoy your stay with us. As I speak, we are at 3,511. But you all know by now what the objective is, in as far as this year is concerned, in as far as where we want to head, the kind of direction that we're moving towards, and things like that. So I'd hoped that we would have an exclusive interview done this week, but my contact person unfortunately fell ill. They have a bad flu, and we were unable to do it. I'm hoping maybe, just maybe, if they do get better on time, maybe we can find time to do something. I can only hope, but for now, I can only hope that if they do get better before the end of this week, maybe we can try and do something. But that's all. That's all. But we can hope for. And then, of course, there's plenty to discuss this morning, but particularly with what happened last night in the UEFA Champions League, not to mention what there is to come in the UEFA Europa League. Unfortunately, I don't know if we'll be able to do everything justice because, like I told you, I'm having a bit of difficulty speaking because of my slight illness. I can only hope that I'll get over it with time. But for those of you that have sent me some kind words, thank you so much for extending the courtesy. Last night was a bit odd, not unusual, not unexpected, but a bit odd nonetheless, because the kind of results that we posted last night are not the kind of results that you'd usually or ordinarily expect. And I say that with a bit of reservation, coming from a place where I know anything can happen in football. But when I sort of look into some of the results, the way they played out, the way the games played out, really, it did not give me much confidence about all these teams that have been in the playoffs, particularly the teams that played yesterday and went through. And among those is Real Madrid, a team I do support. Fair enough. PSG among those, Galatasaray, the other, But I must say, I was very, very unconvinced, very, very unconvinced in their respective performances. And forget that I had certain expectations in terms of my predictions for how things would play out. Forget that. But you know how a game of football is played, and there's a real show of intent. There's a real drive and hunger for it. I thought a lot of that was missing or lacking for some of the teams, especially the way things played out. Right from the early kickoff, Borussia Dortmund did not behave like a team that wanted to be at the next round. They did it. They squandered opportunities, And then later on, Galatasaray, they may have gotten away with it in the end, but it was far from convincing. PSG against Monaco, a 10-man Monaco, because of Koulibaly's sending off. Then you get to Real Madrid. Now, I understand Real Madrid have their injury issues to sort of cope up with, but like I said, they looked unconvincing. It did not feel like they had this innate desire to die a little for the team, to put everything on the line. And you felt that if I had to rate the performance, the energy out of 10, possibly oscillates anywhere between a 6 and a 7. Maybe that's a little too harsh, but that was my impression of it, So, first of all, for me, guys, for those of you that are just joining us, kindly like the broadcast, but also consider subscribing to the channel. Robert Kesakos is my name, and I'm coming to you live from Kampala, Uganda, in case you're wondering. So, to start with, I'll start with the Juventus game, and indulge me on this one. First of all, coming into this particular set of fixtures following what had transpired the day earlier on, where we did not have any major upsets, Newcastle going through, Bayer Leverkusen going through, Atletico de Madrid going through at the expense of Club Brugge. I'm struggling to remember who the other was from the day earlier. From the day earlier, because there were 4 teams earlier on. It was Bodo Glimt. Yes. I mean, right from the Inter Milan game against Bodo Glimt, Inter Milan went into that game with their work cut out for them, knowing what they needed to do to get past Bodo Glimt. But of course, at the end of the day, Bodo Glimt showed that they wanted it more, and they got it when they beat Inter 2-1. To advance 5-2 on aggregate. Never mind that Inter Milan missed arguably 2 of their best players in Lautaro Martinez and Hakani Chanalolu, So, fast forward to yesterday's game, Luciano Spalletti, with all his experience, I think did well. First of all, I did not get to watch this game, so I won't speak much to the details of the fixture as it played out beyond the result and the few minutes that I managed to catch a glimpse of. Because as soon as I realized the job was done and dusted after Vinicius Jr. scores that second goal for Real Madrid, I then moved on to the Juventus game. Never mind that all my initial sources yielded nothing for me in terms of getting the feed. In fact, I had to watch the Real Madrid game on my other phone, and then eventually that's the same phone I would switch onto for the Juventus game. So, but first of all, when I look at the manner in which Juventus' goals come in terms of spacing, I would say it was a bit controlled and measured, similar to what you had with Bodo Glimt. And as I watched on the final minutes, of course, one, they played with caution, and that caution was reasonable because they had let themselves down when Lloyd Kelly got sent off. Initially, it was a second yellow card, but it was sort of converted to a straight red card, So they played with that caution, knowing that they had a numerical disadvantage over Galatasaray. But even with that, they still found a way through. And this is based on the minutes that I was able to watch. They looked more organized. They did not panic in majority of the situations that they went through. They had a bit of calmness to them, a bit of unassuredness, more like the kind of game that you play when you have the experience of playing through those kinds of games. At least it felt that way. So they took the lead through a penalty by Manuel Locatelli, and this was in the 37 minutes. And then, excuse me, and then they go into halftime with that 1-0 lead. When I saw the 1-0 lead, I for one felt it's a bit inefficient. They need to do more. They need to get another, They need to find, at least I thought in my experience, that they needed to at least to go into halftime with a 2-0 lead. And maybe at the end of the day, or at the end of it all, it is what could have made the difference. But it wasn't. Nonetheless, they were unfazed, at least so. But pretty much like all teams that have not advanced, Juventus were the architects at the end of their own downfall. Because when you're chasing a game with a deficit of 3 goals and then knowing you need to score 4 to go through, the last thing you want is to play a game with a man less, because that just makes the mountain even much harder to climb, Look at it this way. That you have, I don't know if you guys have ever dug and digging, If you have a very poor hole and you have a big chunk of land to dig, it makes it hard. In other words, you'll know that if you have a family of 10 people, digging that, let's say 1 acre, could be accomplished in 4 days. Maybe you do 1/4 acre per day or even more. And yet if you're if you're 4, it could take you 10 days in that sort of sense. So Michel de Gregorio had done some really interesting work. For example, he had that immaculate save against Victor Osimhen in the first half. And then on the other side, Juventus get a worthy penalty. Manolo Locatelli steps up and sends the goalkeeper in the opposite direction, and he gives them that 1-0 lead. So they go into halftime with the 1-0 lead. But 3 minutes after the restart, Lloyd Kelly decides to let his team down when he gets sent off. Now, first of all, he's a defender. But the moment you're a defender, you're a defender and you're already on a yellow card, there are certain kind of contacts that you ought to avoid. Now, in this particular case, somebody could argue that it's a bit accidental the way it plays out. Like, he does not go in intending to hurt the player, because to be fair to him, he jumps in the air, heads the ball, and this is the harsh side of football. This is the harsh side of football, because my first reaction was a little harsh on Lloyd Kelly. But to be fair to him, he jumps, he gets the ball, he heads it away, and then it turns out to be an accidental foul, because as he lands back, that's when he does what? He commits the foul that gets him sent off for a straight red card. Siva says hi. Hi, Siva. Good to have you on the broadcast. Good morning. So I look at now after the heat of the moment and everything, I look back at it in retrospect, and in my humble opinion, is that he shouldn't have been sent off. That the foul in itself wouldn't have been even worthy of a yellow card. Not because it was not nasty enough on another day to warrant such a sanction, but because it's merely accidental. He's gone in to play the ball. He is played the ball. It's a header. He's headed the ball away. And as he returns down, it's not like he spreads his legs out to try and kick into the Galatasaray player. That's not the case. That's not the case. But this sort of awkward landing, he stamps on the other player's foot, and I do not know why was even the referee summoned to the VAR? Why? Because that's as accidental as fouls come. Now, allow me use this example, even though the scenarios are a little bit different. Yesterday, two Real Madrid players in Eduardo Camavinga and Raul Asensio both rose in the air to head the ball. At the end of it all, Raul Asensio rose the tallest. He heads the ball away, but then they clash with Eduardo Camavinga. And then in landing, he also lands poorly. That's Raul Asensio. At the end of it all, he had to be afforded some neck gear before he was stretched off. It took a couple of minutes, him getting the medical attention that he needed. And between the two players, it's an accident. It's an accident. So even in this particular case, for Lloyd Kelly, I do feel for him that he does not go in with the intent to commit a foul. No, is he even thinking of it? Because it's not like the ball is on the floor and then you're late for the challenge, or you kick the ball and it's a fall through. In a way, it's not even that. In this particular case, it's, for example, it's like, how do I say it? If, let's say, you're throwing something up from the tree, for those of you that have gathered mangoes before, and unbeknown to you, there's a dog sleeping under the tree, and then the mango comes from the tree and hits the dog. It's an accident. It's a bad one, but it's an accident. You did not intend to do that. Flowey says, what a game yesterday. So proud of this Juventus. We are growing, and next year, Juve will be back to fight for many trophies. It's never red card or yellow card for Lloyd Kelly. Flowey, I certainly agree with you there, because initially, I thought Lloyd Kelly was to blame, to be honest. But looking at it back in retrospect and having watched the incident play out multiple times, I do question the judgment of the referee in this particular case and the judgment of the video assistant referees in this particular case. Because it's more like, assume they are in the VAR room and then one is walking out, maybe to go use the washrooms, and in the process stamps on the other person's foot. Do you want to tell us that's intentional? It's an accident, a bad one. So Lloyd Kelly was really, really unfortunate to get himself sent off. So, but like I said, once you get reduced to 10 men, you do not give yourself a chance. You do not give yourself a chance. So that was Juventus for you. A red card in the 48th minute, then Gatti's goal in the 70th minute gave them belief. With 20 minutes left to play, it's what gave them all the belief, because they knew that they needed one extra goal to bring the game to level, to 5-5 on aggregate, which luckily for them, thanks to Winston McKennie, they were able to do. Cop Miners providing the assist, while the assist for Gatti was from Pierre Carullo. So they go on to score that, and it's game on. I must be honest. Whereas now, before even scoring that, they had a moment where they hit the upright. I think it was Pierre Carullo who puts in the cross. I don't know if Kenan Yildiz actually gets his foot to that one, but it hits the inside of the upright and comes back out in play. So, but from that moment, they knew that they needed to find that extra goal. And eventually the goal came, like I said, through Winston McKennie. A free kick to the back end of the box. It's headed across back, and Winston McKennie is the one to get to the end of it. I think Mario Lemina was around the same area but could not get his head to it to defend. So, and then it was 3-0. Juventus are back in it. They are all square, 5-5 on aggregate. Now, like I said, I did not expect Juventus to go through. Whereas it was not unthinkable for them that they could win this particular game, I did not think for 1 second that Juventus would score goals, at least as many as 3, as many as they did, without Galatasaray responding. But to be honest with you, Galatasaray did not create many scoring chances, especially in the 90 minutes. Like I told you, when you go, besides the Michel de Gregorio save against Victor Osimhen in the first half, you struggle to remember another critical chance that, Galatasaray created in that game, especially in the 90 minutes. Eventually, the statistics will show that they had 8 shots on target compared to Juventus's 9, who had 13 off target, and compared to Galatasaray's 5 off target. Statistics will show you that Galatasaray dominated possession to the tune of 53%. But like I've told you, that after the 48th minute, Juventus were at a disadvantage because they had been reduced to 10 men. Now, of course, we go into extra time. Then in the added minutes of extra time, Victor Osimhen, scores to make it 3-1. Brilliant take of a goal. And once that goal goes in, I think for me, the story was literally done for Juventus, almost done for Juventus. They had an attempt around the 109th minute, thereabout, but they could not make it count. So then they go on the opposite side and they concede. And once they concede that second goal that makes it 3-2, Juventus knew it was as good as done as and dusted. It was 7-5 on aggregate. But I must give Juventus credit. And I'm one of those with the school of opinion that perhaps had it not been for that red card, maybe Juventus might have carried the day. That maybe Juventus might have come out on top, in a way. But of course, that was never the case. So it's that kind of game, really. It's that kind of game. That was the kind of game. They will feel hard done by for the red card but also they will feel proud, especially of their performance. And I think their fans will feel proud of them for their performance in the 90 minutes that they did enough to give themselves a chance. Once the game goes into extra time, Juventus were bound to be stretched, and it simply boiled down to that because Galatasaray had an extra pair of legs to run. That numeric advantage when you're going into extra time is always going to come in handy, especially when you're playing with tired legs, given the amount of work that Juventus had already put in the opening 90 minutes. So for me, it boiled down to that. And they went through. Now, then, yesterday, for those of you that care to remember, we discussed Italian football at great length and its decline and things like that. The context about Italian football, the decline of Italian football is that it's been gradual. It's been gradual. It's been slow in a way. When you look at majority of their top teams, they've been underwhelming, especially on Europe. You look at the Scudetto reigning champions in Napoli, getting knocked out at the league stage. They could only win 2 games, drew 2 and lost 4. They finished 30th on a table of 36 teams. That tells you how poor they were. You look at Juventus needing to go through the playoffs. You look at Atlanta needing to play the playoffs. What was the other team? Really. So, in other words, because I think they had 4 teams, I'm trying to remember what the other one was. But the point I'm trying to make is that the football at the European scene or level has not won in a long while. Of course, one would argue that how about, Inter Milan making it to the finals in 2 of the last 3 years. That's a fair argument, but they still did not win. So the last UEFA Champions League title they won was back in 2010. Again, it was Inter Milan. Jet Setter says, "Where are you from? I'm from Kampala, Uganda. Thanks for asking. Good morning. Thank you for joining us. Kindly like the broadcast, but also please consider subscribing to the channel if it's your first time here. Thank you. So I looked at Italian football, even with the national team. I'm one of those that have expressed my dissatisfaction with Gennaro Gattuso being the manager of that team, or the gaffer. Ever since their triumph in the World Cup 2006, they've sort of been a shadow of the great Italian football team that it is, that have 4 World Cups to their name. Because in the 2010 and the 2014 World Cups, they got knocked out at the group stages. They missed out on the 2018 World Cup, got beat by Sweden in the playoffs, missed out on the World Cup 2022 in Qatar. They got beat by North Macedonia in the playoffs. As we speak, they have to play against Northern Ireland for the playoffs, in the playoffs, to see if they can book themselves a place in the finals of the World Cup 2026. You go back to their performances at the Euro 2024, very unconvincing. They lost to Switzerland by 2-0 at the round of 16 after scrapping their way out of the group, thanks to that late equalizer against Croatia. So really, then, of course, when you go back to Euros 2020 that were played in 2021, you had them winning the Euros, and that was incredible. But usually, sometimes certain successes blind us of the bigger picture. Roberto Mancini at the time was the manager. Of course, he left the team abruptly to join Saudi Arabia, where he burnt sort of his fingers and things like that. But once he leaves, of course, they had to go through a transition of some sort. Chiellini, Bonucci, away, Marco Verratti leaving PSG to go to Qatar, Jorginho no longer starter. He was at Arsenal, where they brought in Declan Rice. So he was reduced to a squad player. So you look around, and the likes of Federico Chiesa, by the time you get to Euro 2024, and no longer the same players that you had at the Euro 2020, played in 2021. You look at that sort of element, and it's not convincing. Then when you get to the Italian Serie A, finances are a big issue, especially finances that can afford them to sign, big players. We've known teams like AC Milan, teams like Inter Milan, teams like Juventus, and to a certain extent, a modern day Napoli, to be having a bit of financial muscle to go out there and spend on some really, really good players to assemble a good team. That seems to have died down a bit, because when was the last time you had an Italian team spend in the excesses of 70 million euros on a single player, or even 80? You have to go back to Cristiano Ronaldo joining Juventus from Real Madrid for 80-something, millions. Then you look around, and you have to go back to Romelu Lukaku joining Inter Milan from Manchester United. Those are some of the big transfer spends in recent memory. And yet, across the divide, for example, in the Premier League, teams are literally breaking their own transfer records. So you go to a team like Chelsea, they have 2 players that have cost £100 million and more. You go to a team like Liverpool, and it's the same story. You go to a team like Manchester City, they've just loaned out £100 million player in Jack Grealish to Everton. So that's enough to tell you the story about Manchester City. We know all about their spending. Then when you go to Real Madrid, of course, in recent times, they've equally not spent much. They've looked to capitalize on teams with players that are running out contracts. But in any case, Kylian Mbappe is way wild of £100 million. He's a £100 million player. Never mind that they got him for free. That was a perfect scope for him. But at least they've been able to spend 80s of millions on players like Tchouaméni, on players like Jude Bellingham and things like that. Even the Spanish La Liga itself has its inefficiencies because of Tebas's rules. That's the La Liga president in curtailing spending. But again, when you want to draw certain comparisons, in the grand scheme of things, you still feel Italian teams are below the pecking order. So you look at teams like AC Milan with a manager like Maximiliano Allegri. I mean, they are capable of going on to do great things, but they can only do great things in modern football if he is backed with resources. I do not believe for once that having Robin Loftus-Cheek as one of the best players is good enough for a team like AC Milan. You know, yes, they signed some players like Samuel Rucci and things like that, but again, modern day football has a lot of good scouting work and profiling and then goodbyes. Even with goodbyes, of course, you get some wrong, but you give yourself a competing chance. Arsenal is at least a blueprint of that. So Italian football in general and in the grand scheme of things has sort of declined a bit. And perhaps its decline ought to be studied. And as of the view that they need to go back to the drawing board and do what Germany did back in the days before they went on to win the World Cup in 2014. When you look at players like Mesut Ozil, Ilkay Gundogan, players like Andrea Schuler, players like Mario Götze, Marco Reus, they came through those kind of channels. Thomas Muller, when Germany went back to the drawing board and designed a plan and said we are going to teach the same style of football right from the grassroots levels in areas where they thought they were inefficient, they went and leveraged on some young Turkish talent, brought in those players when they're still young, and they took them through the ranks, you know. And at the end of the day, the project paid off when they won the World Cup in 2014 in Brazil. For those of you that care to remember, they beat Argentina by 1-0 in the final, that goal by Mario Götze. So it's at the same World Cup that they literally demolished Brazil by 7 goals, and still hurts to this day. But, you know, so getting back to the the Atlanta Borussia Dortmund game. Borussia Dortmund did not show that they wanted this game. They did not show desire, in my opinion. You know, that sort of great. When you look at the first goal in itself, how the two defenders let that sublime cross or pass get beyond them without clearing it. Now, I understand the first defender, you know, doing his best to sort of keep it out, but unsuccessfully. But his next defender, I mean, should be doing it more to clear of that. And then towards the tail end of the first half, Zappacosta's, deflected shot makes it 2-0. And at 2-0, that means the aggregate score is 2-2. And just like that. So in other words, by the end of the first half, Atlanta had brought the game back to square against a Borussia Dortmund who had sung praise of prior to that game, heaping praise on Niko Kovac and his experience, and also bearing in mind that we're talking about the 2024 Champions League final losing finalists in Borussia Dortmund, 1997 winners as well. I think they beat Juventus in the final. Then you look at you look at some of the players they have. Even Borussia Dortmund, by the way, do not have the best of squads in Europe, but it's an okay squad to compete against an Atalanta side. But was Gianluca Scamacca scores that goal in the 50th minute, and then David Zappacosta scores in the 45th minute, right at the death of halftime. It was bound to be a long day in office for Borussia Dortmund. And, you know, football is fun because up until that point, still Borussia Dortmund had not created any moment in that game to try and win this game. You know, yes, early in the second half, I think, was it Bia who hits the best of the upright? But that was their first real attempt on goal in as far as the game was concerned. And that's in the second half. That's why I started by saying a lot of teams that got knocked out did not show that they wanted it enough. And in the end, them being knocked out was a reflection of their own performances. Now, of course, Atlanta in the second half still give us the push that they had given us all night and go and get themselves the third goal, which put them in the lead of the tie through Pasalic. You know? Once that goal comes in the 57th minute, I'm thinking to myself, Mario Pasalic, what the hell have you done? Because then they're now 3-2 ahead in the tie. For Borussia Dortmund, the work is still easy because you need one goal to get yourselves back into the tie and put it to level, 3-3. But because that goal comes in the 57th minute, a part of me thought, yeah, Atalanta are going to go through. Because, like I said, Borussia Dortmund did not look good on the day. Eventually, they pulled one back, which restored parity in terms of the aggregate score to 3-3 through Karim Adeyemi. But from there on, for majority of the game, it felt like one-way traffic, with Atlanta often the ones venturing forward, trying to get that goal that would win the game. And there are some really, really standout performers. You know, players like Shid Kolasinac. For me, he did well. Pasalic, Zappacosta. I thought the way they applied themselves was really, really good. And then we had a moment of madness where two players are sent off. One player for either side, with Scalvini getting sent off for Atlanta and Scholterbeck getting sent off for Borussia Dortmund. Once he gets sent off, you're thinking to yourself, okay, it's still 10-10, quite balanced. But then just a moment later, Ben Sebaini gets himself sent off for a dangerous tackle that culminates into a penalty that Atalanta convert to make it 4-1, and the tie is good as done and dusted. You know? So, in other words, at the end of the day, in a way, I think to sum it up, you would argue that Borussia Dortmund made the tie simple for Atlanta. I understand playing away in the UEFA Champions League is never an easy task. But I had not anticipated the kind of poor display that Borussia Dortmund displayed. For all the credit you wish to give to Atlanta, well-deserved or otherwise, I could not stomach the kind of performance that Borussia Dortmund were putting in. You know? So there it finished 4-1, and Atalanta advanced 4-3 on aggregate. Then, of course, from there, the other game was between PSG against Monaco. That game ended in a 2-2 draw, with Monaco also being reduced to 10 men, thanks to a red card for Koulibaly that was sustained in a space of, what, was it 4-5 minutes? 2 yellow cards and off he went. To be fair, I didn't think the second yellow card was one of a second yellow. But because it's a second yellow card that culminates into a red card, VAR can't intervene because it's not deemed a clear and obvious error from the referee. Monaco started well. They got themselves in the lead. They just could not hold on to that lead. PSG were a bit unserious in that game. It was there for the taking. They were there for the taking. But like I said, the moment you get reduced to 10 men, it's always going to become a difficult game, because it's not until PSG are reduced to, it's not until Monaco are reduced to 10 men that PSG find their way back into the game to restore parity, to make the difference, to put it 4-3 on aggregate. Because that goal, what that goal for Monaco meant was that they had brought the game to square, 3-3 on aggregate. That goal scored by Akileucho, with Koulibaly providing the assist. It came in the 45th minute. Usually, there's some minutes that are really good to score in, especially like at the tail end of the first half. Then you go into halftime with that lot of spirit and vigor that you can do it. So Monaco showed belief. They did not show any respect to PSG. They played it like a French derby of some sort. Like, in other words, not because the two teams went toe to toe, but you could feel that Monaco really, really wanted it. And by the way, had it not been for their early missed chances, perhaps they could have gone into the first half or into halftime with a 3-0 lead, because Koulibaly was the first suspect of missing the earliest opportunity in that game. So once he misses that, of course, football is like that. Some chances you bury, others you miss. Unfortunately for them, they missed that one. Then Falarin Balogun had a deflected shot that nearly hit the back of the net, but the goalkeeper, Matevi Safonov, was there to save. The only moment that I can remember from PSG in the first half was Bradley Bakola's attempt that hit the face of the crossbar. Other than that, they were almost pedestrian in that first half. Then we get to the second half, and Koulibaly is, sent off, and suddenly it's a whole mountain for Monaco to climb. But before that, there had been, you had then a chance from João Neves, the header from the free kick, But for me, to be fair, I did not think that Koulibaly's second yellow card was worthy of a second yellow card. First of all, the referee was far from it. Two, the linesman did not even raise his flag to call it for a foul. He did not. And yet I thought the linesman was a little closer to the incident than it was. I remember Dennis Zacharias, the Monaco captain, tried to make his case for it, but he failed. In any case, yes, there was contact, but not one that I deemed worthy of a yellow card. And then as soon after, Marquinhos' squad offered a Desiree Doué, cross to restore parity for PSG, who then went into the lead subsequently through Kivicha Kvaratskhelia. That was 6 minutes later, because the equalizer comes in the 60th minute, and then 6 minutes later, Kivicha Kvaratskhelia, thanks to an assist by Akraf Hakimi, sees, because Akraf Hakimi, to be fair, I don't even know why it was given to him as an assist, because he has an attempt on goal from distance. The goalkeeper parries it in the direction of Kivicha Kvaratskhelia, and then he gets the rebound, and it's 2-1. Then in the dying minutes of the game, that's when Monaco score their equalizer that makes it 2-2 on the night, but still, they are still 5-4 on aggregate. They tried to scamper away to find the third goal that would have restored parity for the aggregate score, but a bit unfortunate for that. So But the PSG performance was very unconvincing, in my opinion. Really, really unconvincing. I think it was Tez, a second half substitute, Tez, who scored Monaco's equalizer of the evening. The name is spelled T-E-Z-E, Tez, something like that. So, and then eventually it finished 2-2 at full time and 5-4 on aggregate. So PSG advanced, and we'll get to see who these respective teams will be playing subsequently. But I thought, it was something that it was not the kind of performance that you expected from a PSG side. You know, I don't know if I hold them in such high regard, but you know, it is what it is. Then we had the other game at the Santiago Bernabeu between Benfica and Real Madrid, a game that did not have much to it, to be honest. Take away the goals, the one ruled out by VAR, Adagula's goal for, I think, an offside in the build-up, Vinicius Junior's goal, and the injury to Raul Asensio, and there's not much in it. It was not like the goalkeepers were making these immaculate saves and things like that. Yes, you had a few moments where you thought maybe teams could have done better, but it's a game that I thought Benfica looked comfortable being at the Santiago Bernabeu, and that's why I said teams that went through and those that got knocked out, a lot of them did not show that they wanted it more. Real Madrid did not play with any desperation, maybe because they knew they had the one goal advantage going into the second leg, you know, that it's what gave them the confidence to behave them in the manner in which they behaved. So really, Rafa Silva scored in the 14th minute to give Benfica the lead, which brought the tie to level 1-1 on aggregate. But that lead only lasted 2 minutes because Tchouaméni scored off a Vedi Valverde assist, pressing that ball from the edge of the 18-yard box into the bottom corner. Trubin did not have a chance, and it was 1-1. And then in the 32nd minute, that's when Adagula scores, and that goal was ruled out by VAR, so it did not count. But if anything, I gave Benfica credit for staying in the game for as long as they did, because I thought they did enough to stay in the game. And sometimes that's as much as you need to stay in the game, to sort of give yourself a chance, you know. But for Benfica to have a better chance, they needed to have that extra goal, which never came for them. And for the night where you had Vinicius Junior, as pedestrian as he will come on a given match day, I remember I spoke about him prior to him scoring, and I said he's done nothing in this game, but he's the caliber of player who is able or capable of coming up with a good moment or a brilliant moment, even on a bad day for him in office. And it wasn't long after that, in the 80th minute, when he capitalizes on an incredible pass from Fede Valverde from deep in midfield to make the run for it and slot that ball beyond the reach of Trubin. And suddenly it's 2-1 for Real Madrid and 3-1 on aggregate. And for me, that at that point, that's when the game is sealed. You have the game done and dusted. That I did not believe that we were destined for a miracle on the night, that something else was bound to come in that game. And that's when I switched then to Juventus game. So it was a beautiful performance overall for Real Madrid, to the extent that they won. But it's not the kind of performance that where you say, yeah, Real Madrid were really on top of everything. No, not really. So the implications of that means that we have our final 16 teams, Atalanta going through, Galatasaray through, PSG through, and Real Madrid. In addition to Newcastle, Atletico de Madrid, Bayer Leverkusen, and what's the other team? I keep forgetting. I keep forgetting them. I don't know why. I keep forgetting the other team. Bodo Glimt, yes. So the final 16 of the UEFA Champions League are Arsenal, Bayern Munich, Liverpool, Tottenham Hotspur, Barcelona, Chelsea, Sporting Lisbon, Manchester City, Real Madrid, PSG, Newcastle, Atletico de Madrid, Atlanta, Bayer Leverkusen, Galatasaray, and Bodo Glimt. That's the last 16 of the UEFA Champions League. One eye-catching fact in this particular tale is that the Premier League has 6 teams out of the 16. And this is the first time that a single European league is doing that. It's not by accident, by the way. It's not by accident. Whether a Premier League team goes on to win it, this speaks to perhaps a growing level of dominance of the Premier League and the kind of competitiveness that they've shown at home. Are messages working today? Yes, they are. Just for the laugh. Thank you so much. Good morning. How are you doing, my brother? It's a pleasure to see you back. So really, that's for player of the week, it's Alexander Soloth for me. He scored the hat-trick as Atletico de Madrid beat Club Brugge by 4 goals to 1. So obviously, yes, Lolo, YouTube was down yesterday. Baker says Galatasaray failed in Italy. Very bad performance. Yeah, very bad performance, but they managed to get it over the line. And what matters now is how they look ahead and the things they look to do at the next round. So, but those are the final 16 teams. Like I've told you, the Premier League have 6 teams. The Spanish La Liga has 2 teams in Barcelona and Real Madrid. The German Bundesliga has 2 teams in Bayern Munich and Bayer Leverkusen. The French League 1 has 1 team, as do the Italian Serie A in PSG and Atlanta, respectively. The Norwegian League has 1 team in Bodo Glimt. The Spanish La Liga has 3 teams. Real Madrid, Barcelona, and Atletico de Madrid. Then the Turkish League has 1 team in Galatasaray, and that completes the 16. Just for the laugh says, failed who thought they would get through before a ball was kicked. Well, I mean, I thought they would go through, by the way. I keep making reference to my predictions. I don't know if, let me see if there are not any secrets. Let me see if I can try and show you. Down here, I've noted my predictions for the teams that will make it through from the playoffs. And I think I only got one wrong. PSG went through as predicted. Newcastle, actually I got 2 wrong. Inter Milan disappointed us, so it was Bodo Glimt. Galatasaray went through. Borussia Dortmund disappointed us. That makes it 3. Jesus Christ. How many did I get wrong? So Dortmund, Inter Milan, and Dortmund, Inter Milan disappointed us. Atletico de Madrid went through. Bayer Leverkusen went through. Benfica, Real Madrid, I was a bit torn on that one, but I tilted towards Real Madrid for their pedigree. So, yeah, in the end, I got some correct, but Inter Milan and Borussia Dortmund disappointed us. Isn't the draw today to find out who goes which side for the draw? So you were just over 50% correct. Yeah, I got some correct. Now, in terms of the draw, of course, the draws will... Okay. The draws for the round of 16 are slated for tomorrow, not today. Tomorrow, Friday, the 27th of February, 2026, at 12:00 hours CET, Central European Time, I think. Now, but the draws are simple, or at least we can sort of envision what could happen. Yeah, so today is a Thursday because today you have the final round of playoffs in the UEFA Europa League and the UEFA Conference League. So, and then the draws will be conducted subsequently. But one thing is with absolute certainty, we know that PSG will meet either over Barcelona or Chelsea, and then Newcastle will also meet either of Barcelona or Chelsea. So that means PSG can only face Barcelona or Chelsea, and Newcastle can face either one of those two. So we could see an all-English tie if Newcastle draw Chelsea. Then Galatasaray can only play either Liverpool or Tottenham Hotspur. You see, GMT, Greenwich Mean Time. Oh, just Europe trying to strip England of more things we invented. I understand. So, in other words, Galatasaray and Atletico de Madrid. Now, these are teams from the playoffs. Galatasaray and Atletico de Madrid can either play Liverpool or Tottenham Hotspur. Remember, Liverpool have already met Atletico de Madrid in the UEFA Champions League during the league phase, and they won that fixture by 3-2 at Anfield. So that's there. Then Real Madrid and Bodo Glimt from the playoffs can either meet Sporting Lisbon or Manchester City. I mean, if there's one common fixture over the last couple of years, it has been Manchester City versus Real Madrid. We've seen it about 4 times out of the last 5 seasons. Anyways, we'll wait and see. Even though I'd opt for Bordeaux, maybe Bordeaux, Man City, and then Real Madrid Sporting. Then Atlanta and Bayer Leverkusen can either face Bayern Munich or Arsenal. So in other words, those are the options. It's not like it's not too jumbled. At least all teams know who their options are. The question is, for whatever respective team you support, what opponent would you rather they have? If I'm Real Madrid, as a Real Madrid fan, I'd say we are better off facing Sporting CP than we would Manchester City. You know, let Man City go and take on Bodo Glimt. Then Bayern Munich, this one I'm not sure. If you're an Arsenal fan, between Atlanta and Bayer Leverkusen, who would you rather face? Atlanta or Leverkusen? Take your pick. Let me try and predict how the draws will play out. Maybe, just maybe. I'll say PSG versus Barcelona, Newcastle, Chelsea. I'll say Atletico Madrid versus Liverpool, Galatasaray versus Tottenham, Real Madrid versus Man City. Now, this is not what I would love to happen, but I'm just giving my prediction. Real Madrid versus Man City and Sporting CP versus Bodo Glimt. Arsenal versus Atlanta, Bayern Munich versus Bayer Leverkusen. That's my prediction for the draws, as how they would play out for the round of 16. I've not taken note of that, but perhaps you guys will come back and, try and assess my predictions for that. Okay, moving on from that. Today there are some games. There are games in the UEFA Europa League playoff finals, so those ones are equally coming. You have Crvena Zvezda up against Lille at 8:45. Ferencváros against Ludogorets. You have VfB Stuttgart against Celtic. You have Victoria Pilsen against Panathinaikos. And then at 11 p.m., you have Bologna up against Brann, Celta Vigo against PAOK, Genk against Dinamo Zagreb, and Nottingham Forest against Fenerbahce. Nottingham Forest take a 3-0 lead into that one. And then you also have a similar round of fixtures in the UEFA Conference League for the playoffs. So yeah, anyways, guys, why don't you allow me wrap it up here? And I wish you a wonderful rest of the day. It's been the wrap. Thank you so much just for the laugh. Jet Setters, Flowey, Siva, and every single one of you that has managed to catch this morning's broadcast. You've been such a wonderful audience, brilliant company. Let's look to do this again tonight at 11 p.m. And yeah, as we build towards the weekend, but also as we get to know what's happening in the UEFA Europa League and the UEFA Conference League, particularly where Crystal Palace will be at home against Monster, among other fixtures. So yeah, thank you. Have a blessed day, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye-bye for now.